a woman whose husband left her alone with her six children and seventh on the way and took his cattle, cows with him, said that, they've worked more than you. And that woman was left alone to drown in the coming flood water. Access to the healthcare, lady health workers or NHWs, PHUs are also do not have any, access. There's no data found on how many pregnant women are there who are affected by the floods this year.
Welcome to Front Seat to Climate Change. I'm your host, Mahin Azam Khan. In our last episode, we asked a tough question. Are dams really the answer to Pakistan's water crisis? Today, we shift our focus from concrete walls to the people living downstream. Because when climate change strikes, it's just not about water management that's at stake. It's human lives. Floods in Pakistan are no longer rare shocks. They've become a predictable part of the monsoon season, fueled by a warming climate, melting glaciers, and erratic rainfall. And every time the waters rise, thousands are forced to leave behind their homes, their land, and their memories. Displacement caused by floods is one of the most visible signs of the climate crisis here. It's not just about losing shelter. It's about losing a sense of belonging, of safety, and sometimes of dignity. To understand what this really means for families on the ground, we spoke to Maria Patel, a researcher and humanitarian worker who has seen firsthand how climate change is pushing people out of their homes in Pakistan. Whether it's Punjab's river belts, Sindh's rural districts, or Balochistan's arid plains, floods in Pakistan are no longer one-off shocks. They have become cycles of displacement. We asked Maria what the most immediate challenges look like for families who are uprooted by rising waters. Hello, Maria. Thank you so much for joining us. So the floods displaced around 2.5 million people this year. When such displacements take place, what are the immediate challenges people face in terms of shelter, food, and healthcare?
So thank you so much for inviting me over on the topic of displacement, which is so important to talk about. In Pakistan, this year, it's not like, only in Punjab, 2.9 million people got displaced. And in Punjab alone, when 2.9 million people got displaced, only 25,000 people got shelter, which means that the state of displacement is like, really in perils. It is not something which has been looked after, which has been like, which the government has an eye on properly. We understand that the flood makes people leave their homes, but what displacement means and what does it encounters. So as important as having that small piece of paper called CNIC, people do not have an awareness that they have to take it with them when they get displaced. So there is something which needs to be communicated to the people, because if it is going to be a reoccurring event, which is we are seeing it becoming more frequent, and they are coming not just frequently, but and causing more havoc around. For instance, like right now in Multan district, we have seen that the water hasn't receded yet, and water is spreading in more areas. It's moving towards Lodhra. The coverage is and there's no way that the water is going to get receded until or unless we are going to take care of M5 or the ways on which some development has happened, infrastructure development has happened. So until or unless we will not replace those areas, we will not be able to curtail water. So these things are very important when we talk about displacement, future. So we need to take care of those areas. So we need to take care of that important factor that if floods will come, and they are not coming. There are several forms of floods. It's not just river bed. It's not like it's also flash floods, which means the rain, the cloud bursts are happening. If we are calling it cloud burst, which I do not agree with, because it's a different climate phenomena, and Met Department has also said if the rain of 150,000 millimeter is happening for the period of 1 hour continuously without stopping in an area of 15 kilometers like radius, then it is called cloudburst. Cloudburst definition is very different. Anyways, I will not go into that debate or but we need to understand that when such events are going to become frequent and where they do not have any pattern that the water is going to come in certain way, then we also have to add the infrastructures in a different way. That is important, but at the same time, it is important to tell people who have to move from their areas that what do they need to carry with them. We have to make, like when we talk about the disaster preparedness, we have to tell people what they need to be prepared with. What do they need to carry with? What a bag, small bag, they have to stay prepared at all times of their belongings. And CNIC, I mentioned because this is the most important document right now. You cannot open a bank account. You cannot send your child to the school. Like they cannot appear in the metric exam, board exams, if they do not have if they do not have a bay form, or they do, and bay form is needed. Bay form cannot be completed without parents CNIC. So these documents are very important, and your healthcare is affected, your everything, maybe you get healthcare at first place, but if you go and in detail, you see that some document is missing, and then the parent is registered with somebody else.
Adding on to what you said exactly, that climate change is something that will indeed increase the rate of migration and it will also increase the rate of displacements every year, not just in Pakistan, but all over the world as well. So I think it's actually high time that we start, making people aware of these basic documents because indeed this will happen again next year because of the circumstances that we're facing, especially in Pakistan and how vulnerable Pakistan is. So how do repeated displacement, affect people's sense of home and belonging? And what kind of long-term psychological impacts do these displaced families face?
So nobody likes to leave their homes, right? And people want to settle. We are not like trained to be nomads. And then this nomadic lifestyle is not what we have been born with. And people want to belong to a in area as much as they want to belong to a tribe. Belonging is just not of and of tangible things. It's also about small things if I like to if my child likes to sleep with a toy, for instance, and if they do not have it with them and they keep have to keep changing, then it is going to affect their sensibilities in a big way. And when we talk about psychological impact, I'm not the right person to talk about the psychological impact alone because they are experts who know it better. But it only um, you do not care. You stop caring. What I see, what I see in people is that they only it becomes more selfish. They want to protect themselves. And to that extent that they stop caring about their families. There was in 2013 flood, 2010 floods in Kashmir. We came across the story of a woman whose husband left her alone with her six children and seventh on the way, and took his cattle, cows with him, said that they've birthed more than you, and that woman was left alone to drown in the coming flood water. And that is sense of like uh, that's what we are going to fight with. That's one thing which actually really shaken me up a lot, and that made me think that what a disaster make people do. It although that's an inspirational story because that woman built a life not just for herself, not just for her children, but actually for so many more women in her village. She started picking up handicraft and started making, and then they started selling it to other main city, and then to other cities, and then to other. She built up a life and a whole community of those strong empowered women. That's a strong, but not everybody has those means and resources. So, but if we equip the future people, those people who are vulnerable, who can get affected, Actually, like, anybody who lives uh, on not an on a structured land, or like do not have a proper what do you call the socio-economic support they have, then everybody, all of those are vulnerable, which means like, maybe 70% of the population is like, vulnerable right now in Pakistan. Um, Whoever, like, we call it below the poverty line, which is also a very um, poor way to say it. And it's very sad way to say it as well. And maybe like, we need to revisit this entire phenomenon of the poverty line, which is also redefined by the climate impacts, or the disaster actually, not just climate. It could also be conflict, because at the same time when we were talking about the Sears climate events, um, we have seen like there was a military operation which was going on in many parts of KP, and people were already like, displaced and living in shelters. And at the same time, the climate event happened. So it's disaster. It's double whammy. Like people lose their sense of belongingness, and they just do not know what do they want to do with their lives. And eventually they want to like, get rid of whatever little depends on them. Whatever little means their children mainly, you know, and they want to get rid of them. And that's where this concept of child bride also comes, like, um, that how people will just want to not have any liability, any sort of liability, when there is less, what do you call it, less, less future to look for. So less of a future to look for. And like, people I've seen in this year's floods, that in Sawat, middle class families got affected. So over the years, how the trend is changing about of displacement as well is very important to understand. For instance, like, earlier on, if the floods used to come in the mountainous area, what used to happen was that people used to migrate to lower grounds or to their relatives for shelter for some time. And this is what happened in Punjab as well, that people found shelter or with their like, relatives. But now the relatives' families are also growing. They have more children, they are getting married, they're like, their house is shrinking, their living space is shrinking for them. So those who are wanted to welcome those, relatives, be more and more inclined towards it. When we talk about inflation, that affects people in this way as well. Like, people do not have enough means to sustain their own lives rather than host other people for days like unknown. Because you do not know when the water will recede, when they will be able to like, get their homes back, when they will like, be able to have help get their shelters back. And this is what we saw in Sawat this year. That why people were so badly affected, because it's like their space was shrunk, and they did not have electricity, they did not have like, even the partially damaged homes did not have enough, like their belongings washed away, because it's like landslides happen more frequently. Their homes are like, partially damaged by floods and then like by the landslides or things like that. So this is like going to be uh, very different kind of. These are going to be very different kind of disasters, and they need like, more holistic approach when we want, if we really want to like, resolve it. I think the displacement has not looked at so far in terms of policy. People like, it comes under the ambit of refugees or migration, and it's not like, independently like have any policy on displacement, which the displacement.com also talks about, that there needs to be like, acknowledged displacement is an independent factor, and it could be temporary if tackled properly, but it will become permanent if not tackled properly. So this is what needs to be like, looked at.
Floods don't just sweep away homes, they reshape communities. In some cases, the crisis leads to harmful coping strategies. One such practice is the rise of monsoon brides, where young girls are married off during or after floods. We asked Maria what drives these decisions and what the long-term consequences are.
Like you just mentioned, that obviously nobody likes to lose their home and nobody likes to lose their sense of belonging. And you also rightfully said that everyone experiences displacement in a different manner, and everyone has a very different experience about displacement, and there's so many intersecting factors. So we often also hear about the term monsoon brides that you also mentioned. So when we hear about this term, monsoon brides, where young girls are married off during or after floods, what drives these decisions and what are the long term consequences?
Of course, long-term consequences, everybody knows. It's like, monsoon bride could be of any age. It could be like she could be 7, 8, or she could be 13, or she could be like, 18. You never know. You never know whether she is ready to get married or not. You never know at what stage she is in. Like, if we talk about women, it's like, you know, one push towards women empowerment and two steps backward towards women deprivation. Like, how much ever you want to work on women empowerment, you cannot, like, talk about women empowerment if you take care of these displaced people and their, especially girl children. Um, Women in there, when they start, like, adulting, 13 year, 12 year, 11 year, um, they become a big liability. We know it. We know it when we talk about forced conversion, and we know it, like, when we talk about underage marriages. We know it. That becomes more frequent when it comes to, like, I if I have lost a home and I have four girl children, then what would I do? Where would I, like, I would just, like, maybe staying up all night to protect them. So the least I could do is, like, find them the safety. And that safety maybe is, like, wedding them off legally, or, like, or religiously, like sending them off to somebody without seeing whoever that is, what kind of background they have. If they have shown interest, that is, like, it's scary, because protection at the cost of my girl child's future is not something I would like to trade off. And because I could not afford their education, I could not afford, like, minimum safety. I could not afford. I could not afford their menstrual kits during this, because I do not have enough thing to, like, sustain my day to day. Sustain my day to day. I do not have enough food. So how can I take care of these things? Like, if my child has to, like, because I do not have my house is partially damaged and there's no bathroom and the child has to go out, then I also have to go out with them, you know, at night, in the middle of the night, even in the day. Like, you do not know where, like, how you can offer protection to that child. So this is something, like, where the girl child, monsoon bride thing, the term monsoon bride has popped up. And it's a petty state. It's not something to be justified. It's not something to be like, it's a horrific state. We cannot, like, talk about girl education. We cannot talk about women empowerment if we will not take care of, like, of them in during disasters and displacement, especially. So there is a holistic policy which needs to be made when it comes to displacement, and which offers shelter to, especially, like, underage, like, what we can do for them, so that, like, we can offer them, maybe, like, we need to build shelter homes, especially for those people. It needs a different kind of an eye when it comes to disasters and monsoon rights
It is
side of
indeed
things.
very scary because this is something that actually we can't quantify. And this is something that usually accelerates as well when such disasters take place. And it's always not visible to us. Building on that, what kind of data exists in Pakistan and how many people are displaced nearly every year by floods, and how reliable do you think the data is in Pakistan?
That's something, like, which the displacement.com also wants to work on, because the data is not holistic, or it's like, not at one place. NDMA has a different data. PDMA has a different data. PDMA is Provincial Disaster Management Authority. NDMA is National Disaster Management Authority. And then district DDMA is also there, which is like, hardly functional. So DDMA has a different data. And there's no there's no semblance in that data. It's on a government level, which I'm talking about. Now, UNOCHA has a different data. UNHCR has a different data. When we talk about displacement, because we talk about displacement in terms of refugee and migration, that's why UNOCHA and UNHCR, are taking care of. And then UNICEF has a different data because it includes children. So they have an eye for or for so many families are affected, and then so many children are affected. So there's nothing and the data is somehow NDMA says UNHCR has shared this data with us. UNHCR says NDMA has shared this data with us, and there's you know just rolling the ball in each other's court and not giving us clear picture. When I talked about 2.9 people got affected, it's also coming from just different. It is gathered from different newspapers and other resources, and whoever came up with this. Like for instance, more than 600 camps, 648 maybe camps has been established across Punjab, which only housed 25,000 people. But 2.9 million people is not even 0.1% of the data which has been housed. But this is not going to be enough. This kind of support system or relief work is not enough. And then there's a duplicacy of effort as well. For instance, um, in Bunair, what we have what we have seen in the floods in Sawat even, that the most accessible areas, like areas close to the road, have gotten more relief than the relief which could have reached to the far-flung area, which is cut off from the main road. And now pregnant women do not have access to the healthcare. Lady health workers or LHWs, BHUs are also do not have any access. There's no data found on how many pregnant women are there who are affected by the floods this year. I have looked for this small data, and in KP, where can I look for it? BHUs do not have a data. There's no health authority ministry which has any data. There's no NGO which is working on this. There's no government, institution which is working on it. So from where will I get this small data? Maybe even for instance, if we say that 9,000 people are affected in this flood in the entire KP, and during those 9,000 people, partially somewhat affected or completely affected, I'm not talking about it. But I do not know in what levels they are affected. Like, are they affected by by just health, by education, by livelihood? We do not have any data on this. And this, when we talk about data, we do not understand what data actually entails. I looked at the NDMA's data, which has been circulated across groups and also on their websites and they're publicly available, and that talks about houses damaged, lives lost, injured, and livestock. Now, how many schools are affected? What what, because most urgent is some aged people, people who are in certain age or people who have disability. We do not have any data on that. That how many disabled people are affected, how many women who need urgent help are affected, how many schools are damaged. There is a data of a school damaged, but also that is not complete holistic picture. That's also seems like the data is still coming on that. So this is something which we have to if we need to build a holistic response system, a complete response system, then we need to all the institutions who are responsible for the provision of livelihood or of public, they need to pitch in our data at one portal. And there should be one portal. And also, even the relief work has to be put in over there. For instance, one institution independent, volunteers, school, college volunteers, they have raised some funds and they are now good taking medical supplies to which area they are taking to, how many people they are able from able to cater. I don't want those people to be catered again by another organization. So there is a duplicacy which needs to be avoided. And that can only be possible if we look at the data and we have the provision of data, uh, like complete data set. So that's what I believe, and that's where the data is a very important factor when we talk about displacement, especially. And displacement is now becoming a more. I mean, I cannot stress enough about it. Displacement is now becoming a part of her existence. I can get displaced even while living in a big city, having a complete shelter. I can get displaced even for 8 hours, 10 hours. In Karachi, we have seen people got displaced, and now PDP has shared this thing. If you look at the data, the post said at 4 a.m. the rain started around the morning. At 4 a.m. they got to they got to evacuate, send people to their homes, safety. So even if you are getting displaced for a few hours, that sense of not knowing where you are going to end up at is so horrendous. And it has to be knowing that what is going to happen.
I think you're absolutely right. It's something that's becoming very common, and that's something very scary. It could be any of us, anytime, when these floods happen and when these disasters strike. Any of us in any city or any town or any village. You've made it very clear also that without reliable data, relief planning can't match the actual needs on the ground. And that raises important questions about accountability and systems as well. So, what role does the government usually play in resettling displaced communities, and where do you see the gap?
As I mentioned earlier, I'm only talking about one province. But I can talk about GB as well, and glacier outburst. I can talk about KP as well, where the government minister himself came on TV and appealed for in KP, he appealed for the people to rise up and help people who have been. That's a sad affair that your government is not unable to, and they are calling for philanthropic act, which is going to be there, which people are going to help, of course. Ethi is there, Silani is there, and rescue da 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 is there. Everybody is there. Al Khidmat is there. Everybody we know. These are the big institutions who are work on relief. So we know it. NDMA is there, but it's a sad thing when you see a minister coming in appeal and giving an appeal for people to help come support. Why is it not in the government's mandate to provide a relief for why it is not there? It's mind-boggling to think about it that government, how can government not be prepared? Then who should be prepared for it? Who should be look for it if the government cannot do that? And hats off to the Punjab government who are ready for that. In GB, it was very sad because the glacier melting and outbursts, and it was horrendous this year. And Pakistan was the earliest recipient of GLOF. Pakistan has Rio Pact, which happened in 94, 96. Since Pakistan is receiving the GLOF funding. GLOF is the um, it's a and still Pakistan is not able to. I understand somewhere it is quoted there are 7,000, there are 3,000 glaciers, there are 7,000 glaciers, there are 13,000 glaciers. Even to that extent, the number is like, again, it's a sad thing that we do not have enough data on glacier. Like one expert, I heard him saying like 3,000 glaciers. One video I saw of like a very prominent newspaper, their video said like 7,000. One document of of Pakistan's government institution, I saw 13,000 glaciers. Even we do not have this data. And like this is so sad that we do not know what threat we are going to face. And for 30 years, we are receiving this funding on this specific topic of glacier melting, glacier lake outburst, and we still do not have enough data. And that's like, what really saddens me. And because these are all the factors which contributes to displacement. My focus was on displacement, but as much as the conflicts affect displacement, climate is like, also affected. And climate is not just like, displacement is the part, is basically what is displacement? It's suddenness. It's so sudden that you do not know what is coming for you and what is going to happen next. That is like, why it needs an urgent, like, attention.
I think it's evidently very clear that if we do not have proper data and if we don't have proper data systems, we cannot work properly on displacements. Thank you so much, Maria, for the powerful recommendations that you gave during this session. Your insights actually bring remarkable depth to the conversation on displacement and resilience in the face of floods in Pakistan.
Floods in Pakistan are not just seasonal disasters. They're recurring reminders of inequality, weak systems, and untold human resilience. As Maria Patel highlights, displacement isn't just about moving from one place to another. It's about losing a sense of security, community, and belonging. Yet amid the loss, people adapt. They rebuild. They carry the weight of trauma and still move forward. But survival shouldn't be the only goal. What communities need is protection, dignity, and long-term planning. This has been Front Seat to Climate Change. I'm your host, Mahin Azam Khan. See you next time.